Hello, this is the girl with the controller, and today we're going to be reviewing the Legend of Zelda Manga series. So I was a huge fan of the Legend of Zelda series as a kid, and I actually tried to adapt so many of the games into book form when I was in elementary and middle school, so you can imagine my excitement when I found out there was going to be an official manga series that was adapting these games into books. I remember going to Borders back when Borders existed with my 40% off coupon and was always so excited when the next volume came out. If you don't know anything about this series, it is actually written by two women that together go by the name Akira Himekawa, and I'm sorry if I butchered the pronunciation of that. I tried to look it up, but I couldn't find it. And how the series works is that most games have a one-part volume summarizing the whole story, though there are a couple that have two-parters, like Ocarina of Time and Four Swords. Now, how is this series? It depends on what you're reading it for. One of the biggest points that might change your perception of it is understanding that this series is definitely aimed towards children, particularly about mid-elementary through middle school age. I was 14 and a freshman in high school when the first volume came out, and when reading it I realized I'm already a little bit too old for this, but I'm still totally gonna read it anyway. But despite being aimed for children, this series does some pretty cool things. And the first is its art style. Something that makes the Legend of Zelda video games really unique is that every game has a different art style. And it's really cool that the authors took that into their series and adapted their style a little bit to fit each game. For example, Ocarina of Time looks very different from the Minish Cap, which also looks different from A Link to the Past. You can also tell that these women really love the Legend of Zelda games, and that passion definitely comes through in their art and storytelling. And where this series really shines is when the volumes are based off of games that don't actually have much story in their original game. It really allows the authors to pace out the story well, to flesh out characters, to have a general framework and build a world, and have minor characters take roles, and to also allow Link to have a little bit more of his own personality. And speaking of Link, while it's a little bit controversial that he talks in all of these volumes, on the whole, I think it works really well. And something that also is cool is just like the art style changes in every volume, because each Link is actually a different Link, if you don't know much about the Zelda series, each of these versions of him have a little bit of a slightly different personality, which, again, I think is very apt. The only downside to this is there's a couple versions of him that I don't want to go so far as say that he's kind of whiny, but he's kind of whiny. And at least for me, that's kind of a problem. Like, that's not Link. Also, while I praise the volumes that don't have a lot of story in their original games, the games that do, on the whole, have much weaker manga adaptations. I don't know if it's just that the authors felt too boxed in to hit all the points that they needed to have, but they're generally not very well paced. Like, I believe Majora's Mask is probably the biggest offender of this. The entire volume kind of reads like a checklist of all the big points that they had to hit, and there's a ton of story in this game crammed into one volume. And again, they hit all the big points, but it feels like, okay, we gotta hit this, and this, and this, and this, and here we go, published. And it makes it kind of awkward, and I'm like, I'm trying to read and get engrossed in the story, and I just feel like plot points are hitting my face. The authors also sometimes make changes to the stories to make them, fit a book form better. And some of them I think are really cool, but then there's others that just don't make sense and I think make the series weaker. Ocarina of Time in particular, I think, was the biggest offender of these, and so some minor spoilers about these two volumes. Again, some of the changes I really did like. In the beginning, in Hyrule Castletown, Link gets to meet Zelda, but he doesn't realize that it's her, and they get to play together. And I think that's really sweet and also feels natural for both of their characters. Also, in the very, very beginning, Mito, however you pronounce his name, joins Link in going through the Great Deku Tree. And that's actually something that one of the versions I wrote of that story when I was a kid, I had him join Link as well. So obviously, I think that's a good choice because I did it too. But then there's also some choices that just don't make sense. They changed Volvagia, and instead of being, this ancient dragon that's very feared, they just decide to go a kind of more personal tale route, but there's just this random flashback after Link's an adult to back when he's a kid, and it's like, oh hey, he bought this dragon and then had to let it go, and then the dragon got corrupted and now is evil and he has to take down this dragon, and you're just like, where did this come from? Like, I get it, I'm supposed to feel sad, but I'm just kind of confused. And when it comes to Ingo and the farm, I guess it wasn't good enough that he was just this disgruntled employee with hopes and dreams of power. And instead they're like, hey, he has this earring that is making him evil, and if you just knock off the earring, he's okay again. And you're just like, what? Why did you have to reduce it to that? It was fine on its own. Again, these changes felt inconsistent sometimes. Sometimes I really like what they added, and then other times I'm just so confused. But ranting aside, would I recommend this series? Again, it depends what you're coming to it for. If you are a kid or buying the series for a kid, absolutely. It's a very child-friendly series. It's a great adventure. It's fun to read. I would definitely recommend it. However, if you're expecting this series to blow you away, you will most likely be disappointed. Also, I wouldn't really recommend this series for someone who's looking at it as a gateway to get into the series that doesn't already know a lot about Zelda, because the parts that are kind of inconsistent or the pacing issues just don't always translate well if you don't know what's really going on. However, if you're like me and you're just obsessed with The Legend of Zelda, it is a series worth looking at. Despite my complaints, I actually really enjoyed reading most of the series, and again, it was a lot of fun. I think there were some really cool concepts, even if on the whole the series doesn't live up to its full potential. If I had to give it a score, I would give the series a 6 out of 10. If you are interested in just picking up a couple of volumes and not the entire series, I would first of all recommend Oracle of Ages. That one was definitely by far my favorite in the whole series. Secondarily, I would recommend Four Swords Volume 1 and 2. Again, this is a game with very little story in it, so it was really fun to see like 4 different personalities of Link, and while it might not feel as super Zelda, it's a ton of fun. It's really cute. If you're interested in picking up any of the volumes of this series, I'm going to include the links down in the description. There's also a complete box set now for about like $50 on Amazon, which I will also include because that is a great deal and way better than even me paying with my 40% off coupons back in the day. However, it is worthy to note that my reviews and also the box set does not include the Twilight Princess series that is now being published. There's 4 volumes currently. I don't know if that's all there's going to be or if there's more, but I will have to read and review those at another time because they actually look pretty promising. And considering there's 4 volumes, that might actually help the pacing issue I complained about. But anyways, that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. This has been the Girl with the Controller, and I hope you have a lovely day.